Still through, but that was Barcelona's first defeat since December 21st, 2024 across all competitions. And in that span, Barca outscored their opponents 74-22 and scored 4 or more goals on 12 different occasions. After the match, Barcelona's Robert Lewandowski spoke about what the team will take away from that loss yesterday.
I think that for us as a team, you have so many young players that will be also the good lessons that Champions League is always Champions League. You have to be always ready. You cannot play for 95%. And I think we did a lot of mistakes in the first half in the on the pitch, and because of this also that Dortmund could create the new situation and push us in forward as well. But in the end, okay, we did this. So now I think sometimes it's better if this kind of game happen now than later, because later for sure we don't have space for this kind of mistake.
It's obviously a interesting situation, right? You get the first leg and you're up 4-0, and at that point you have a completely different mindset going into the second leg. I almost think, yes, there is a positive, but it's almost irrelevant to some degree in terms of, how the game went through. At the end of the day, you want to qualify, right? And during that game, there was never a moment there where Dortmund was 1 goal away from tying leveling the tie there. And so I do think that the most important part of the game was when it was 2-0. And when it was 2-0, Barca became Barca for a little bit, or just enough to get that own goal and kind of clean up the leg and kind of be, confident enough that they were going to be able to go through. And so I don't think that there's too much to it, but yeah, it's obviously better that it happens in a game where they're up 4-0 than in the semifinals.
So, Mike, did they get all the losses out of their system now? Not going to lose anymore the rest of the season?
I think this is a good wake-up call for them, because there is one player. This isn't Barca's first 11, and you get to rotate players. With only one defensive midfielder the rest of the way of the season, and we talked about Gavi being suitable replacement in there, you cannot play Gavi and Fermín. That's what I took away from this match, because the both of them, they were getting each other's spaces. I thought there were a lot of gaps there. And that midfield three, where they really disappointed me, the mentality is one thing, but second balls. That is a midfield three that they didn't win enough second balls. And credit to Borussia Dortmund, they won second balls and they got back in the tie. But Pedri was a big miss for 60 minutes.
I think you're spot on in your analysis. When Pedri came on, he gave Barcelona a little bit more order and control of the game. In a moment where you needed control, he came on right after the 2-1, and Barcelona really needed that. I don't know if it's so much of a wake-up call, maybe a learning experience. And Lewandowski walked away with that saying, this can't happen again. Because this is business as usual. For Robert Lewandowski, moving on to the Champions League semifinals is almost normal. And there's a lot of young players on this team that haven't been there before. And against any other rival, maybe they would have been found out. Araujo said it after the game as well. We resolved the game. We figured it out. And I think he said maybe he was referring to the tie rather than the game. They managed a goal and survived.
Right.
They knew that they were walking at one point. Dortmund pushed them to walk on a tightrope, and they walked a tightrope. But Barcelona figured it out. And like you said, I don't know if it wasn't for nothing. They suffered. You gotta learn how to suffer. They just weren't locked in from the get-go. And I think that's a moment where you say, all right, let's learn from this and let's grow.
And what's interesting is when you look at these numbers of this year's Champions League quarterfinalists, Barcelona, they ranked second to last in goals allowed per match, XG allowed per match, and clean sheets of the 8 teams. And Nico, of course, a lot of this, does have to do with that high line that Barcelona play, right?
Yeah, it's risky, but they're going to die on this hill. They might not die on the hill. They might be kings of the hill, right?
Yeah.
68 times in this Champions League they have caught opponents offside.
What?
The second team that has most caught opponents offside is Aston Villa with 34. So quite literally
doubled.
Half, yeah.
But Benny, do you think that that's a sustainable way to go on and win the Champions League? To win the Champions League, that's what I'm saying.
They're there, right? Well, I think
are they your favorite?
The results have shown that they can do it. Again, Champions League is a different beast, right? And you're playing now, you're in the semifinals, you're going to play only top teams that take advantage of the mistakes. But at the end of the day, do I think Barcelona can do it? Yes, I still think that they're the favorites to win the whole thing. And to Nico's point, That's the way they play. Not only from the defensive perspective, that's one of the ways that they, catch teams offside, the over-eagerness of other teams to get in behind, and so they don't allow them to get those counterattack moments by creating those offsides. But at the same time, it's the starting positions that then lead to the attacks, and I'm sure that they're number one in goals expected, all those other stats that we see from the offensive side of things. And that's just
this is who they are.
Yeah, it's who they are and who they're going to be.
They need to be locked in.
You see this all over the world. If you come into the game thinking it's 4-0, we should get this done. We showed a week ago how much better we are than Borussia Dortmund. The mentality of the game is huge. It's not just what you have, the talent, the skill, and we saw it obviously yesterday.
And counteracting what the other team brings to the table, because you weren't locked in and the other team was hella locked in.
Nothing to lose.
Right? And then on top of that, add everything that you were saying about the tiredness. They had that Osasuna game that was thrown kind of like a wrench into
right
the
out
whole
of the
system,
gate. Yeah.
Right? And they have been playing every 2-3. At max, you said 4 days?
Yeah, just 4 days has been the maximum.
Wow.
They don't look as fresh, as sharp, and eventually they'll physically, maybe they'll find their way back into it.
A player that I didn't realize how important he was in terms of leadership, right? In those games, you know that feeling where you got the 4-0 lead, you're a young player, you look behind you, and there's always a leader, whether in the midfield or in the back line. Iñigo Martinez is one of the key players in this Barcelona side in terms of setting the tempo, in terms of being a vocal leader. And Hansi Flick in his press conference after the first leg, he finally gave kudos to Martinez. He said, hey, a lot of people talk about the front three, Pedri, Frenkie de Jong, Pau Cubarsí, but the guy that was the first person to buy in to this project was Iñigo Martinez. Great player on the ball, but his leadership in the back line, I thought that was sorely missed, and he was on potential yellow card suspension. So Hansi Flick trying to manage that. Credit to Barcelona, though. They get through. Most important thing.
Well said, Mike. I'm still hung up on Nico using the word hella. I haven't heard that since 2010. I love it. We come from the same generation. Awesome stuff. Okay, here's a look at where the bracket stands. So on the other side, Barcelona will play the winner of Bayern or Inter. Quickly, who do you think that they want in that matchup?
Nico, I know you got to.
If I'm Barcelona, I'd rather Bayern.
Yeah. Bayern's.
So it has been kind of an up and down season for this Borussia Dortmund side. So Nico, when you look at their UCL campaign in particular, what's your biggest takeaway?
I think that they overperformed. We would have liked to have seen so many more performances in the Bundesliga, like the one they put out yesterday against Barcelona. The personality with which they came out, the conviction with which they played was like we've never seen throughout the season. I think Nico Kovac is onto something with this Dortmund side. I don't know if he's got it right on the nose, but it's trending in the right direction. So overall in the Champions League, I think they overperformed, given what we've seen in the Bundesliga.
Lahoud, I know you watch a lot of this Dortmund team. Are you high on Kovac leading this team in the right direction moving forward?
Look, I had my doubts early on, because with this side and the players that they signed, that Guirassy aside, were underwhelming. You look at players like Waldemar Anton, who was one of the best defenders in the Bundesliga last season with Stuttgart. I mean, the guy was like, is he under the table having Hefeweizen? Like, where are you, man? So Nico Kovac.
Lahoud loves it.
I love a good Hefeweizen, man. That's my Champions League. It's my Champions League bevy. I do drink bevies for Champions League days.
Do you drink it under the table, or are you sitting upright?
If Dortmund's playing like they've been playing throughout the season, sometimes. But what I think he's done really well, and I go back to his time at Mainz, right? Mainz, they had the Sebastian Hallers. They had players who could get you goals on the counter. But defensively, his Mainz sides, in cup competitions, they were resolute defensively. And the big difference.
What about his Frankfurt team that won?
Sorry, Frankfurt, that's what I'm talking about. Not Mainz. Frankfurt.
His Frankfurt team, the one that got to that won the Pokal.
Yeah. And so what I see the big difference between these two managers is Nuri Şahin, it was like this football philosopher. You know, everyone wants to be the next Pep Guardiola. And I had a chance to talk with him 1v1. And what concerned me was, he always had this, let's be expansive, put the two fullbacks up. We can go play with anyone. And we saw the almost moments, Real Madrid, for 60 minutes, brilliant. But we also saw some of the naivety that comes with being a young manager, where he takes off oftentimes his best player. This fella right here.
The game management.
The game management there was poor. This guy right here in the last month, the game management's been excellent, barring the Barcelona match in the first leg. I thought he got that wrong, but he's instilled structure. that lets everyone know this is your job. You simplify it, you go and execute.
Currently, Dortmund are 3 points out of a Europe Conference League spot, 4 points out of a Europa League spot, and 6 points out of a Champions League spot. So how likely do you boys think it is that this Dortmund team qualifies for Europe despite having a not so great Bundesliga campaign?
My money is on them either qualifying for Europa League or Conference League, not for Champions League. That's a long shot. It's 6 points to make up, but there's a couple of games that might get tricky, including this weekend against Borussia Mönchengladbach, who's a direct competitor.
Look, if this was prior to kickoff against Barcelona, I would 100% agree, but I think there's something brewing with this Dortmund side, and I go beyond the Barcelona match. Going back to Der Klassiker, there was a sense of pride that's been missing, and you asked me what he's brought to the table in Nico Kovac. He has reinstilled the pride that we saw that got them to a Champions League final. So I actually picked them to get the better of Gladbach. It's a big match, though. It starts with that.
Well, Mike, we're going to have you put your hard hat on as we do look ahead to what Dortmund is going to look to do and make over this club to be more competitive next season.
Look, there's so many injuries that have happened at the wrong time, but we got to go with the biggest position of need.
You don't like Niklas Zula?
No.
Come on, bro.
I don't. The guy that looks like a WWE wrestler on any given day with the bleach blonde tips. It's time. You got to get more depth at the center back position. And right now, there's a bit of emergency around the club, talking to people at the club. Nico Schlotterbeck, that injury, you don't know how he's going to come back from that. They've been linked to bring back Mats Hummels, of all people, for the Club World Cup. For the Club World Cup.
Quick fix.
But that's a short-term fix, but you need to get a proper center back. To get Emre Can, who, when he plays defensive midfield, like we saw last year in the Champions League, you need him and Pascal Gross as your midfield too, and get a proper center back, get depth in there. And then the thing and the position that I think would be a big fix, and a player I think would be a big fix, this guy, Ryan Cherki from Lyon. The club was linked with him in the January window, and I know some Borussia Dortmund fans will see his name and think, uh-oh, last time we were linked with a Frenchman, Ousmane Dembélé, it did not work out too well. He ended up leaving the club to go to Barcelona, but I think this guy would thrive under a manager like Nico Kovac, and especially in this 3-4-3 formation. Imagine him playing slide rule passes to the likes of Sekou Guirassy or Karim Adeyemi, making runs in behind. That dynamism in midfield or in attack would unlock this Dortmund side in big games and bring more consistency. But number one.
But, okay, hold on, Mike. Is Cherki just because he scored the equalizer against your Man United? Are you trying to now steal him so you can go into your other team?
He's been good. No.
And Lyon's wanted to, kind of need to sell a player like Cherki, right? And I think for Dortmund on the negotiating table, that's a big one. Understanding that they're desperate to sell players with a little bit of budget restrictions, try to get that provisional relegation off the table completely. I think that it's not a bad shout.
Oh, it's an excellent point. And it goes hand in hand with Cherki, but you lose Marco Reus. You lose a big portion of the identity of your club. You talk about respect for the badge. You talk about the soul of what Borussia Dortmund means. A fan in himself. You got to find a consistent playmaker. The erratic nature of this side of when they show up and when they don't is there is not enough of a consistency in the playmaking department. I think Pascal Gross, in this new formation, he can potentially fulfill that role. But in big matches, you're going to need more than Pascal Gross. Look at all the big clubs, all the teams that make Champions League and do well and compete in both domestic competitions and in Europe. They got a playmaker.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And having that extra playmaker gives you a little bit of depth in that midfield position. Because let's just say they resolve their defensive issues. You got John back in the midfield, along with the Pascal Gross. Julian Brandt there, right? And he's, in theory, one of your playmakers. But if you could pair that with somebody else that's high quality, extremely high quality, right? That can win you games and not rely so much on Julian Brandt. It feels like this team has been Julian Brandt dependent in the big moments.
Yeah, and now they're just focusing on the Bundesliga and trying to make European football